Welcome to the Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Frank talk about sex and dating.
Hello, everyone. Tamara here. Welcome to the show. Today's guests are Angie and Tiffany. We'll be talking about their podcast, Hard Things, and why they started it. If you like this episode, be sure to tell your friends about it and rate it as well. Thanks for joining me, Angie and Tiffany.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're super stoked to be here. Thank you so much.
Yes. Yeah. I figured this would be a good one. We talk about some of the same things, but I guess you guys might get into more the juicier side of it. So, which is good. And the funny side. Mine's more educational. Yep. And I had a friend tell me to stop calling it educational because they'll know from listening, but that's what I prided it on. I like having, I talk about books usually. So, but anyway,
yeah,
go ahead.
I listened to a couple of your podcasts in preparation for this visit, and the gist that I got from it was like being in high school, right? Where you and your podcast are the teacher in the classroom, and Angie and I are we're the education that happens in the girls' bathroom.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, very cool.
We're at lunch for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's just get right into it. That's usually what I do. So, how did you guys come together, or why did you start the podcast? Like whichever you want to start with, your beginning story.
Well, Tiffany and I met in grad school in June of 2021. Oh my God. And we kind of clicked because we were both on the older age bracket than the rest of our cohort members. So we kind of just clicked, and then we had similar, like, I don't want to say personal issues, but like we didn't go through the cohort in the same, like with the same classes and things like that. So our program of study was a little bit elongated. And so we just that's how we bonded, because it was like, let's paddle this canoe together. I had been thinking about doing the podcast, and I feel like I bullied Tiffany into it. How do you feel about that, Tiff?
It's funny you say that, because you're not the only person that's been trying to bully me into doing a podcast. So, but yeah, Angie's been asking me to do this podcast since 40 seconds after we met.
Yeah. Yeah. We both have been told by multiple people that like we're pretty quick-witted and like, oh, I would watch a reality show if you were in it and things like that. And so those were the strings I pulled.
In school, we had to do, so like part of grad school, a big component on it is education. And we would have to teach the class, right? A lot of times. And a lot of kids had graduate assistantships where you would teach a class and you were a teacher's assistant. And they prep you for that by letting you teach a class. And when Angie and I taught our sections, it was very apparent that we were way better at it than anyone else. And after we would teach, Angie came up to me. I think that was one of the first times we had like a really, really in-depth conversation She's like, I really, really hope that you fucking teach, because I would take your class. And likewise, hers was really good. So I think that we knew early on that we would be really good together in communicating with the masses.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. And then
plus we bounce off of each other really well too, I think. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what caused you to do this topic in particular? Like, that was just like a natural thing for you two, or
you got to talk about what you know, and there's nothing I know more than trauma and heartbreak. So, like, why not?
And I Tiffany was probably the fourth or fifth person when I would just tell a little bit spicy stories where she was like, "Oh my God, this is fascinating," and
because it's not me.
Yeah, so I've had a couple other people that are like, "Oh my God, you should write a book about all your sexual exploits." And I never really thought about it until like Tiffany and I had a conversation on the phone, and I was like, "This is what our podcast should be." And so we kind of ran with that.
Okay. And what have you had so far? I know you're fairly new, or episode wise, but
we're 2 episodes in. We're recording 3 and 4 tonight. And I want to say that for the most part, the first 2 episodes were really just whatever came natural. We just had a conversation. Obviously, there was a lot of introduction to our personalities and who we are, and involved in that, just to let people kind of get the flavor for the show. But so far, we haven't had a theme. We've had just a rolling punch after punch after punch that just, it was naturally fluent between us. And I think that's why we really wanted to do this. Even if no one ever listens, it's fun for us. We enjoy it. We enjoy talking. We do have a list of themes now. So future listeners, have no fear. It will be a little more organized.
Yeah.
We've also gotten a lot of good feedback. I personally wish we got more like feedback on our pages. I think most of our stuff has been like directly like DM to Tiffany or myself, which is not a bad deal. But the consensus on my end, and
Same.
Tiff, you can okay. Basically like, man, you guys' chemistry is really great. You guys are touching on things that I talk about with my girlfriends. And then on the opposite side, which I think surprised Tiffany and I both a lot, was that we have a lot of guys that are like, this is awesome. Like a lot. Like we were thinking we were going to cater more towards the, lower middle age women's experiences in the bedroom and with men generally. And that was going to take off. And instead it was that age bracket of guy. And they're like, I wish women would talk to me. Why isn't anyone telling us these secrets? Thank you for doing that. And so I'll take it, because we've gotten even some really good feedback from the guys, which I think will help us moving forward with the discussions.
I think that there's definitely an appreciation for the insight into a woman's mind. And then conversely, I think that what we're understanding, or at least what I'm understanding, is the reason that there are so many male listeners, or at least I won't say so many male listeners, because my analytics on the pages that I manage indicate that it's 50-50. But feedback, I think that there's a high possibility that we don't connect with women very well and we connect with men. We don't have a lot of close women friends.
Sure.
And this is a reflection of that, I think. And that's okay. Like whoever will listen is who we want to listen.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And mine's the same way. It's like 50-50. And it's more like younger men have found it helpful. They said they don't learn this stuff, so it's any insight they can get is helpful.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So what are some of the topics that you've had that, you said that you got the feedback on? Like, what are some of those kinds of things you guys talked about in the bedroom?
Well, we talked a little bit about body count and whether or not it's appropriate to divulge that information. And I think both Tiffany and I agreed that it's probably not best practice to share that unless you really do feel that there's going to be not a judgmental argument after the fact. But it kind of goes back to don't ask a question you're not ready to know the answer to.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of it'll be a just judgment call for each person. There's such a stigma, for women where, guys get praised for the higher their number is, and the higher a woman's number is, the more they get slut shamed. And so we're trying to negate that stigma because it's not fair.
Yeah.
Let's be real. It's not fair. And it's like guys want you to be experienced in the bedroom, but they don't want to know how you got there.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a comedian a long time ago that talked about that. Like, do you ever wonder how she got so good? And then my boyfriend at the time looked over like, but yeah, maybe that is the theme of my podcast. That's why I started to eliminate the double standard. We like sex just as much and there's nothing wrong with that. So.
Right. Amen.
So I wholeheartedly agree.
And I think for us to like that, and then piggybacking off of that is that it's not sex and relationships. They don't need to be in a vacuum. They don't have to be defined by the constraints that society has put on them. So for Angie and I, we are completely different in our sexuality, and it allows there to be a positive representation of both the simple, innocent type and then the more, salty type of sex and sexual exploration and relationships. Yeah, adventurous. And that they're both okay and nothing's wrong with it. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah. Yeah. Because my co-host, generally, I call her the majority of the time co-host. She was raised religiously and didn't have sex till she was married. So we definitely had different perspectives with that. So yeah, Yeah.
We touched on that too, because I have a friend of mine that is a virgin and is in her mid 40s. And it's like when someone says early on, like high school, like I'm going to wait till I get married, and people are like, okay, if that's what you want. And then because so frequently people meet their significant other in like college or in the workplace.
So they're not waiting that long.
Right. And so it's like, okay, I can, that's fine, whatever. But as you age, if you're staying on that road,
that space gets
harder
bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes. Yeah. So I think those kinds of things are sometimes difficult too, because you want to respect people's religious beliefs, political beliefs, all those things. But even people who do feel comfortable having sex at 40. I think I said to Tiffany at one point, dating in your 40s is like going to the thrift store. You just want to find something that's not broken and doesn't smell.
Yeah. That is funny. And I just wanted to throw in a book, since I talk about books. I mentioned this before, but the book God, Comedy, Sex is good about the people that had issues growing up, grew up religiously, and like now they have issues, or it was a very good book for that. Just FYI.
That community's got to be getting smaller and smaller by the minute.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it probably is. And the ones that are virgins after a certain age, it's harder for them, like we were talking about, to actually ever not be a virgin. Like it's, there's so much expectations there.
Well, even temptations too.
Yeah.
I will say that I don't think I've ever met a man who was saving himself. It always seems to be the women.
That's interesting.
Have you met any male virgins at our age?
Well, not at our age, no.
Yeah.
At least not that I know of. If they are, they didn't tell me.
See, I've never met any male virgins or seen any male virgins advertise their virginity like you hear from women. So I'd definitely be curious to hear more about men who are saving themselves, whether it's for religious reasons or not, and where they're shopping for partners.
Yeah, actually, I talk about this. I used to do stand-up comedy, and I talk about a 40-year-old virgin that I was with. So I was, he was a virgin until we met.
For what purposes?
It's just more, he's really shy. And I think that's really what's going on more for guys than anything. It's nothing about they're doing it. I mean, some may be doing it for religious reasons, but it's just, the world is much different. And
they don't harder and harder.
People.
Yeah. When everyone that you meet is an avatar, it's tough.
Yeah. And with online dating, in the statistics, I don't know if you listened to this episode, but like all the guys, 20% of guys get all the matches and 80% get none or very few.
Yeah.
So I know a guy who he would be a virgin if he didn't go to prostitutes and like overseas. So it's very prevalent, more so than, especially for younger guys, unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, it's just really hard to meet people in person. No one talks anymore.
Yeah.
And if you get matches online.
So I'm wondering though, like, is that everywhere in bigger metropolitan areas? You see in the movies and in the media, they have like the singles night or the speed dating and stuff. And I wonder, like, is that still happening? I know here where we live in our area, when I was single, I looked for that stuff and it wasn't really there. Mm-hmm. So if we can cultivate those environments, then that can relieve some of that pressure. But it's hard.
Well, but no, because the problem is, we talked about this a little in one of our episodes. Like, guys are now nervous.
Yeah.
Right.
They want to be rejected.
Because it's not even like, because guys always had to deal with rejection back, as far as time went on. However, now they have to worry about consent and permission and having people like socially shame them on social media, right? And so or videotape them or whatever. I remember my brother told me a story that he basically went and asked a girl if he could buy her a drink, which seems super innocuous, like not even that big of a deal. And the girl put her hand in his face and said, "Ew, no."
Yeah.
Right? Which on its own is just rude, but imagine like now your girlfriends are videoing this guy coming up to you and you're going to go and do something like that.
It could be everywhere. That could hit TikTok. That could hit, even the news picks up TikTok stories sometimes.
Right. And then what's worse, and I didn't know this until just more recently, a guy friend of mine said, that guys have to be careful of women who just want meals.
Yeah. That's a thing.
and that women will like swipe right on some matches because they're hungry and they want free food. And so now guys, instead of inviting a woman to dinner, they invite them to coffee or a drink because they don't want to spend $50 and the girl has no intention of getting to know them.
Yeah. But how terrible is that though? Like there's nothing more miserable to me than sharing a meal with someone that I don't want to get to know. Like that's disgusting. How do you even that would change the taste of my food.
Right.
Just that's the ooh to me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It gives me the ick for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I went on many dinner dates, but it was to get to know them. And then once I arrived, yes, maybe I was like, their picture wasn't quite matching. And so I did the dinner, but I wasn't like, and one guy even said, because his picture, like he had one really good picture and the rest weren't that great. So of course all the women want to go for like, hope the real picture, the one picture is the best.
We're dumb. We're so dumb.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, yeah. So, and he said, oh, most women usually give one word answers and like, don't say much. And I'm like, well, I'm going to at least enjoy the meal, enjoy the conversation, even though I know I'm not interested. I'm not going to be rude about it.
I will say that as I've progressed and gotten older and dated, I have come to appreciate sharing a meal with someone that I'm not romantically interested in, but I'm still glad that I got to have a conversation with. And I can appreciate, in a different world, we might have been really good friends. So I do hope. But you can't be friends with them. Yeah, you can't do it. So
men and women are rarely friends without one of them wanting to sleep with the other.
Yes.
That's, statistics.
Yeah. But or maybe we could have been good coworkers. Like, I don't know, but it's really sad. But at least I can still say I got something from this. Right. And it wasn't romantic and it wasn't a free meal. It fed my soul a little bit, maybe, or my brain. So there's that.
Yeah. All right. Well, someone told me recently that my podcast wasn't juicy enough. So I think we should
wanted to bring
into some of, so we need to bring some of that in and some of your guys. So, I mean, I don't even know I did a whole episode on oral sex, like, from the guy perspective and male and female perspective, both sides giving and receiving. So we've covered pegging, we've covered squirting, like all the things. So like, I don't know if there's any particular topic or just more the dynamics or crazy stories. I don't know.
So for us, a lot of the stuff that we cover is our unique experiences because they're opposite ends of the spectrum. And we talked about oral sex. We talked about blowjobs in one of our last episodes quite extensively. And Angie demonstrated something that she had seen in a porno before and told us a nice juicy story about she took something she saw on a porn and no shit, she tried it on a man.
Yeah.
And it changed his world. And now every male listener is like, babe.
Yeah.
There's something I want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and I've said in the episode, very few women are good at doing it, which you would expect most women can be good at it. Or like I would have assumed everyone is good at it. But guys are like, nope, there's a few that have been good. Some it's just terrible. And most of them, there's just all right. And I would
say to the men, you have a responsibility to educate us.
But not only that, one of the feedback things that I had gotten after that episode aired was, and I think we can agree, like women generally can agree when the roles are reversed. Like, if they feel like we're enjoying ourselves, they are going to enjoy it more, right? Yeah. And so I think like the women who tend to say things like, well, they don't call it a job for nothing, right? Like those people.
That's a turnoff.
Right. Yeah. Because it's like, I don't want it. Happy birthday. Right. Like nobody wants to feel like it's an obligation because then it's not as exciting. Yeah. And when you show enthusiasm with anything, it's going to be received better. Right. And then if you can take constructive criticism, right? Because then what happens is a guy might be like, go do this. And then the woman says, you should just feel lucky I'm doing it at all. Like those are just really bad ways to communicate those things. And I think we have to be better. And then like, if we're better in the bedroom with communication and how we look at sex as a rule. I think men will take that, like pick up the gauntlet and run with it also. Because I don't think they want us to be miserable. And if we're happy, we're going to want to do it more. Right. So I think like,
That's it's human nature, right? That's social learning theory right there. It's if I model this behavior when you're performing cunnilingus on me, then I can expect you to pick up on that and eventually mirror that behavior back to me.
Right.
So yeah, you have to feed it in order to get the meal to start cooking for sure. Sex is not unisensorial. It's multisensorial. They actually did a study with erogenous zones, and I shouldn't even say this because we're supposed to talk about erogenous zones.
Yes,
but,
we are. We will, but they're two separate podcasts. We're good.
They did a study that said, or it showed theoretically, as much as any study can, that it is multisensorial, and that having your erogenous zones touched and explored doesn't just turn you on, it turns on the person that's touching you. And they basically proved that, like, even just watching, they had a component with vision and stuff with all of these where they said, if the person touching me isn't watching me, then I get less enjoyment and the person giving it gets less enjoyment.
Yeah.
So like you have to be all in if you're going to do this kind of shit. Like you have to go in emotionally, you have to go in physically. Like it has to be multifaceted. It's not just tactile. Vision has to be involved. Your voice has to be involved. Hearing has to be involved. Touch. It's all the senses that have to be activated. And we're taking that away when we bitch and moan about sucking a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pardon my French.
No, yeah. I had an episode where we talked about sex languages. It was from a quiz. And like you were saying, there were some people that like different feathers and different things touching them. It was like all the sensories. And then there was a quiz to see which one you're more like, what you like most. Like I'm the typical, like normal, just visual sexual person. But like, I don't know, there's 5 different ones. It's pretty cool. It's one of the second highest listened to podcast.
Oh, wow.
Or episode. So
interesting.
Yeah. Of course, it mentions porn in the title.
That'll do it right there.
Yeah,
so
right there.
And
it makes sense because I'm visually impaired. So it makes looking at that, or well, no pun intended, thinking about that generally, it makes sense why I try to take it out of my experience completely. Sure. Because I'm like blindfold. Let's do blindfolds all day because I can't really see anyway. And so if I ask to be blindfolded, then now they know, and I don't feel obligated to let them know I can't really see anyhow.
It heightens the other senses.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah, definitely.
Part of that study, what they did is they gave people a map of the human body, right? Something that you would see like an autopsy map where it's like the chalk outline of a human. And they said, color in all the spaces on this body that you feel are your erogenous zones. And then they gave them another one that said, color in all the spaces that you think someone else's erogenous zones might be. And what they found when they laid all these human dead body maps together was that there is no erogenous zone. The entire body is an erogenous zone.
Yes.
Yep.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It is.
Touch your partner, guys.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Get your hands wet.
And actually, especially if your language is, if your love
Physical
language is
touch.
a physical touch. Yeah. There was a study, or a guy told me, and I talk about this in my stand up too. He was like touching my face in the elevator. And I was like, and I finally was like, I'm so horny around you. I don't know what it is. And his, mother-in-law had told him to touch her daughter more often. And basically the same thing. Like
Wait.
Yeah. He was trying. They were
Grandma
divorced.
said, touch my daughter more.
Yeah, because
Wow.
I guess she must have complained or something. I don't know, but or maybe he was complaining. I'm not sure which. But he said that touching a woman 10 times a day makes a woman want to
dedication.
have sex.
Like that's a good mother-in-law I want to be.
I love this. I love that so much.
Yeah, non-sexual touching.
Can you touch my daughter more? By the way, did you know the G-spot's on the top of the vaginal wall?
Yeah.
That's great.
I love her. I hope one day that's my mother-in-law.
Yeah. And the stand-up, I joke that it only took me 3 or 4 touches, but
you're like,
well, some people are Some people are gifted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and if you haven't been touched in a long time, it has more of an effect, right?
Oh,
So if
yeah,
it's been
for
a hot minute, then you're like, yeah, I don't need all 10, bro. We at 1.7, I'm good.
Yeah. Well, and then back to the oral sex real quick. We because you talked about enthusiasm, and that's one thing. Like I talked to a few guys about enthusiasm versus technique, and the guys mostly said enthusiasm is more important in their mind. But I'm like,
Wow.
technique, obviously, I mean, obviously both would be preferred, but in my mind, I was thinking technique would win out because, like I said, the people that know how to do it well, and when you know if you do it well, when people unsolicited tell you that, not if you ask them and then they say yes. So
Yeah.
just so
I
you
think
know,
if you're an enthusiastic participant, also, the other person is more comfortable giving you a little direction. So the technique improves automatically.
true, yeah.
Right. So if I'm super enthusiastic when I've got a Johnson in my throat, but I'm not doing great and it could be better and he knows how to make it better, he's probably going to be a little bit more comfortable, like moving my head a little bit or sitting or standing or moving my hand a certain way or saying something to guide me. So
Hopefully,
it's so important.
some of the guys I've talked to just endure it and then don't say anything. So yeah,
That's the worst word.
and the
That
biggest
is-
thing is teeth, like with too many teeth for women.
Yeah.
So just, I do the two mouth hand combo. I found that the best. You don't
Same.
have to do much. You just use the hand for most of it. And
It's so messy though. I think that's the worst
Yeah.
part. Like your hands just get filthy and gross.
But that's the thing. But this is what we kind of talked about. It's about the spit. I'm telling you.
yeah, for sure.
Know.
The more
Yeah.
spit, the better, you know?
Yeah.
And the feedback that I had gotten from the person who DM'd me was, he said, when guys say that they're interested in going down on women, when they say they're doing it for them, they mean that, but they want us to be like a little to the left or whatever. And as long as, at least this is his opinion, he said, as long as we're making some noises and moving around a little bit, right? He was like, it turns them on. And I was like, well, that's what I'm doing wrong because I'm bored to death. And so I end up going, okay, watching the clock because I just want it to be done, right? And
so you're violating your own rule.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I didn't know, but I didn't think about it like that, right?
You couldn't empathize with their experience because you're not a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, communication is like key on pretty much every episode I have and it's so hard. No one can do it. No one wants to hurt anyone else's feelings. And then it's hard to know what you want yourself or speak up for it. So yeah.
That's the interesting part though, is that we think that it would hurt someone's feelings. Why do we think that?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah. And they'd actually rather know than be clueless. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Just tell them because they probably want to know. You don't have to be mean about it. Like that's one way. You don't have to be like super rude about it. But
very true.
I think that we're afraid like of being rejected. And if someone were to tell us, oh, you're not doing it right, we can't imagine them delivering it in a kind way. So, because no one talks, like you don't grow up hearing kind things about sexuality. It's not ingrained in us. So it's got to be fear-based.
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, and that's why we both have these types of podcasts, so everyone can actually talk about it. And actually, I should mention, I have a summit in August 16th and 17th. We have all my podcast guests, dating coaches, and some sex coaches are going to be on from 8 to 10 p.m., August 16th and 17th. And this should come out right before then. But just so we can, when anyone is going to be streaming on several different groups and pages, so people can...
Let's talk about sex, baby.
Yeah.
Right.
You and me.
All right. And then, so I try to keep this to around 30 minutes we're almost there. So I know obviously it's called Hard Things, your podcast. Is that social media, the same stuff, or how can people get a hold of you?
We are on Facebook. We are on Apple and Spotify and YouTube currently. We are in the process.
And Instagram.
Oh, and Instagram. That is correct. We're in the process of figuring out short videos for TikTok. And then I think we may be looking into iHeartRadio as well.
It's a job getting out everywhere.
A job.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, anything else you want to just kind of like sum up what your philosophy or what, just kind of closing comments for each of you?
I would say that, like you said, the podcast is called Hard Things. And we do talk a lot about sex. That's obvious. And people love talking about sex and love hearing about sex. But I think it's important to remember, like, we call it hard things, not just because of, erections and sex, but because hard things in life are tied to our sexuality and our sex and our relationships, emotional things, traumatic things, work, relationships, finances, all of that. And we want to encompass all of that. And eventually we'll get to all those things too. But it's important to remember that sex is not by itself. It's tied to all these other things. So we definitely don't want people to get the wrong idea that we're just about sex. We believe in relationships with people, whether they're friendships or romantic. And we want to talk about all that and hear about all that stuff. So sex is tied to everything in life. Sex is not just sex. I mean, for Angie, it kind of is just sex, but she's a special case. So,
well, and I think, and that's where I'm coming from with it. Like, I want to bring more awareness to women who don't think like typical, like what is stereotypically, conservative, June Cleaver-esque behavior. Like, it is okay to whatever is okay. And so I've said it before, I'll say it 100 million times. Consent, communication, like, be safe and sane, consensual, the whole nine, and whatever is your jam, as long as you find another person who enjoys those things, that's what the focus should be.
Yeah. Relationships shouldn't fit inside of sex. Sex should fit inside of a relationship. And I think that's really what we want to communicate with our podcast.
Okay. Well, it sounds really good. And I'm sure people will be listening as we talked about. Everyone likes to hear about sex and talk about sex. So.
Perverts, the whole lot of you.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check it, tell your friends about it, and check out their podcast as well, Hard Things. All right. Thank you very much for being on, Angie and Tiffany.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Frank Talk, Sex and Dating educates.